A millionaire rushing to catch a flight spots a struggling mother and her baby in the pouring rain. What he does next will leave you speechless. The rain fell relentlessly over New York City, turning the bustling streets into a chaotic mosaic of umbrellas and rushing pedestrians. Lucas Harrington sat in the back seat of his sleek black car, the rhythmic hum of the windshield wipers a faint backdrop to his thoughts. A powerful CEO with a reputation for precision and pragmatism, Lucas rarely let anything interrupt his focus. He mentally rehearsed his upcoming presentation, every detail meticulously calculated. His schedule was his lifeline, a tightrope walk where balance meant success. For Lucas, emotions were a liability. His life revolved around numbers, deals, and control, leaving no room for anything messy or unpredictable. He didn't notice the rain-soaked city beyond the tinted windows. To him, it was just another day. But as the car approached a red light, something caught Lucas's attention. Outside, illuminated by the faint glow of a flickering street lamp, stood a young woman clutching a baby in her arms. The rain soaked through her thin coat, and her hair clung to her face as she tried to shield the infant from the downpour. She held a small, handwritten sign, "Please help. Food and shelter needed." Lucas's jaw tightened as his gaze lingered on the scene. The woman's face was pale, her exhaustion evident even from a distance. Yet there was something striking in her eyes, a quiet determination, a refusal to crumble despite the odds. The baby nestled in her arms whimpered softly, its small face peeking out from the folds of the coat. "Keep going," Lucas muttered reflexively, his practical side taking over. This was not his problem. He had meetings to attend, flights to catch, a reputation to uphold. But as the car began to roll forward, Lucas found himself looking back through the rearview mirror. The sight of the baby's tiny fingers clutching its mother's coat hit him like a jolt, stirring something deep within him, something he had spent years suppressing. Memories of his own childhood, marked by struggle and loss, surfaced unbidden. "Stop the car," he said abruptly. "Sir?" Daniel asked, glancing at him through the mirror. "Just stop." Lucas lowered the car window, the cold rain immediately dampening the interior. "You," he called out to the woman, his voice firm yet not unkind. She turned toward him, startled, her body instinctively curling around the baby as if to shield it from a potential threat. "Get in," Lucas said, gesturing toward the back seat. The woman hesitated, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. She clutched the baby tighter, her body trembling from both cold and exhaustion. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the rain. Lucas hesitated for a moment, unsure himself. "Because you shouldn't be out here in this weather, especially not with a baby." Emma's gaze flickered to the car's interior, the warmth and shelter tantalizingly close. She hesitated for another moment, then made her decision. Carefully, she climbed into the back seat, her movements slow and deliberate. She cradled the baby protectively, as if fearing the warmth of the car might vanish if she let her guard down. "Here," Lucas said, handing her a blanket from the emergency kit stashed beneath the seat. She took it hesitantly, wrapping it around the baby first, before finally pulling it over her own soaked shoulders. "What's your name?" Lucas asked after a moment of silence. "Emma," she replied, her voice steady but quiet. "And this is Sophie." Lucas nodded, studying her for a brief moment before turning to Daniel. "Take us to the house." "The house, sir, but your flight?" "Reschedule it," Lucas interrupted. "Just drive." The drive to Lucas's mansion was quiet, save for the sound of the rain and the occasional soft whimper from Sophie. Emma sat rigidly, her arms wrapped tightly around her daughter. She stole glances at Lucas, trying to gauge his intentions. To her, he was an enigma, a man whose polished exterior suggested wealth and power, but whose sudden act of kindness hinted at something deeper. For Lucas, the silence was both unfamiliar and unsettling. He was not used to having his plans disrupted, let alone by a stranger. Yet, as he glanced at Emma and Sophie through the rearview mirror, he felt an inexplicable sense of responsibility. He didn't know what had driven him to stop, but now that they were here, he couldn't bring himself to turn them away. When the car finally pulled up to the sprawling gates of Lucas's mansion, Emma's eyes widened. The grand estate, with its towering columns and meticulously landscaped gardens, seemed like something out of a dream, or a different lifetime. She clutched Sophie closer as the car came to a stop, unsure of what awaited her inside. Lucas stepped out first, holding an umbrella as he opened the door for Emma. "Come on," he said, his tone softer than before. Emma hesitated, then stepped out, cradling Sophie as she followed him toward the house. The warmth of the mansion enveloped her as soon as they stepped inside, and for the first time in months, Emma felt a flicker of relief. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but for tonight she and Sophie were safe. Emma stood in the grand foyer of Lucas Harrington's mansion, her breath catching as she took in the opulent surroundings. Polished marble floors gleamed under the glow of a crystal chandelier, and every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. The warmth of the house was a stark contrast to the biting cold she had endured just minutes earlier. Her eyes darted around nervously as she clutched Sophie tighter to her chest. She felt out of place, as if stepping into this luxurious world was a mistake. The soft coos of her daughter drew her back to reality, and she pressed a kiss to Sophie's damp forehead, her own silent promise to protect her no matter what. Lucas set his umbrella aside and turned to Emma. "There's a guest room down the hall," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You can stay there tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what's next." Emma nodded wordlessly, unsure of what to say. This man, a stranger, had offered her something she hadn't had in months. Safety. She couldn't bring herself to ask why. Instead, she followed as he led her through the mansion, her footsteps hesitant on the smooth marble. When Lucas opened the door to the guest room, Emma's breath caught again. The space was larger than the entire apartment she had once called home. A plush bed with crisp white linens sat in the center of the room, flanked by elegant bedside tables and soft lamps. Heavy curtains framed tall windows that overlooked a rain-drenched garden. "This is too much," Emma murmured, her voice trembling with a mix of awe and hesitation. Lucas looked at her, his expression unreadable. "It's just for tonight," he said simply. "Make yourself comfortable." As soon as Lucas left, Emma let out a shaky breath. She set Sophie down on the bed carefully, marveling at how the baby immediately relaxed against the soft mattress. For a moment, Emma just stood there, taking it all in. The warmth, the quiet, the sense of security. It was overwhelming. Her stomach growled softly, a reminder of the sparse meals she'd had recently. Spotting an ensuite bathroom, she decided to clean herself up before addressing the hunger gnawing at her. She filled the sink with warm water and gently wiped Sophie's face and hands, smiling softly as the baby cooed in contentment. "See, Sophie," Emma whispered, "for once we don't have to worry." After settling Sophie with a bottle of formula she had managed to hold on to, Emma ventured out of the room cautiously. The house was eerily quiet, and she felt like an intruder as she wandered toward the kitchen. When she entered, her breath caught again. Gleaming appliances and marble countertops made the space look more like a showroom than a place where meals were prepared. She hesitated, unsure if she should even be here, but hunger and exhaustion won out. She opened the refrigerator, her eyes widening at the sight of fresh fruits, vegetables, and neatly arranged containers. Pulling out a carton of eggs and a loaf of bread, she set about making the simplest meal she could manage: scrambled eggs and toast. The scent of cooking filled the air, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emma smiled. It wasn't much, but it was food she could prepare for herself and her daughter without fear or judgment. She plated the food carefully, carrying it back to the guest room where Sophie lay sleeping. Emma ate in silence, savoring every bite. When she was done, she fed Sophie bits of toast, laughing softly at the baby's delighted expression. It was such a small thing, sharing a warm meal, but to Emma it felt monumental. After dinner, Emma gave Sophie a warm bath in the luxurious ensuite bathroom. The baby giggled as she splashed in the water, her laughter echoing off the marble walls. Emma's heart swelled as she wrapped Sophie in a soft towel, holding her close. As Sophie drifted off to sleep, Emma sat on the edge of the bed, gazing out the window at the storm still raging outside. The rain blurred the lights of the city, creating a soft, dreamlike glow. For the first time in months, Emma felt a flicker of hope. "This is just one night," she whispered to herself, stroking Sophie's hair. "But maybe it's a start." She thought about Lucas, the man who had given her this fleeting moment of peace. He was an enigma. His demeanor was distant, almost cold, but his actions spoke of compassion. Emma couldn't understand why he had stopped for her and Sophie, but she was grateful nonetheless. As the storm outside began to wane, Emma allowed herself to dream of a better future, even if it was just for a moment. For now, she and Sophie were safe, and that was enough. The following morning, the mansion remained quiet, the storm outside having given way to a gentle drizzle. Emma woke up to the sound of Sophie's soft babbling and smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in months. She carefully dressed and carried Sophie downstairs, unsure if she was allowed to roam but hoping to express her gratitude to Lucas. Meanwhile, Lucas was in his study, engrossed in a video conference call. He didn't notice the sleek black car pulling up to his front gates, nor the sharply dressed woman stepping out with an air of entitlement. Victoria Lane, his former lover and a woman accustomed to getting what she wanted, strode toward the front door without hesitation. Victoria let herself in, confident she would find Lucas alone. Instead, she was met with the sight of Emma standing in the spacious living room holding Sophie. Victoria froze, her perfectly shaped eyebrows arching in surprise before her lips curled into a calculated smile. "Well," she said, her voice dripping with venomous curiosity, "this is unexpected." Emma turned, startled by the sudden intrusion. Victoria's gaze swept over her, taking in her simple clothes, the baby in her arms, and the obvious weariness in her expression. It didn't take long for Victoria to piece together a story, one that painted Emma as a gold digger exploiting Lucas's kindness. "And who might you be?" Victoria asked, her voice sweet but her eyes cold. "I'm Emma," she replied hesitantly, clutching Sophie tighter. "Lucas offered us a place to stay for the night." Victoria's smile widened, though it didn't reach her eyes. "How generous of him," she said, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. "I didn't realize he was running a charity." Emma flinched at the comment but said nothing, unwilling to stoop to confrontation. Victoria took a step closer, her designer heels clicking on the marble floor. "Just so you know," Victoria continued, her voice lowering, "Lucas isn't the type of man who does things out of the goodness of his heart. You must have quite the story to convince him otherwise." Before Emma could respond, Lucas appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to irritation. "Victoria," he said coolly, "what are you doing here?" "I came to see you, of course," she said, turning to him with a dazzling smile. "But I see you've been busy." Lucas's gaze flickered to Emma, who looked uncomfortable and out of place. He frowned slightly but said nothing as Victoria continued. "Don't you think it's risky, Lucas, letting a stranger into your home?" she said, her tone dripping with false concern. "You never know what someone's intentions might be." Victoria's words lingered in Lucas's mind long after she left. Though he dismissed her snide comments as jealousy, a seed of doubt had been planted. What did he really know about Emma? Why had she been on the street in the first place? That evening, Lucas decided to address his concerns directly. He found Emma in the kitchen, quietly feeding Sophie pieces of fruit. She looked up as he entered, her expression wary but polite. "I need to ask you something," Lucas began, his voice steady but distant. "About your past." Emma's stomach tightened at his tone. "What do you want to know?" she asked carefully. "Why were you out there? In the rain, with a baby?" His question was blunt, and though his gaze wasn't unkind, it felt piercing. Emma hesitated. The truth was raw, messy, and painful. She had spent so long trying to hold herself together, to protect Sophie from the harshness of their reality. Now she felt exposed, as if every crack in her armor was being laid bare. "I've had a rough time," she said softly, her voice trembling. "I lost my parents, my home, and Sophie's father left when I needed him most." Lucas's expression remained unreadable, but his silence was heavy with unspoken questions. Emma felt her defenses rise, her pride wounded by the subtle implication that she had to justify her existence. "I didn't ask for your help," she said, her tone firmer now. "You offered. If you regret it, we can leave." Lucas was taken aback by her sudden defiance. He hadn't meant to accuse her, but Victoria's words had made him wary. Before he could respond, Emma stood, holding Sophie tightly. "I appreciate everything you've done," she continued, her voice steady despite the tears welling in her eyes. "But I won't stay where I'm not trusted." With that, she turned and walked back to the guest room, leaving Lucas standing in the kitchen, grappling with a mix of guilt and confusion. By the next morning, Emma had packed her few belongings and was ready to leave. Lucas met her at the front door, his expression conflicted. "You don't have to go," he said, his voice quieter than before. Emma looked at him, her eyes filled with both gratitude and hurt. "Yes, I do," she said simply. "Thank you for your kindness, but we need to move on." Without another word, Emma stepped out into the drizzle, Sophie nestled against her shoulder. Lucas watched them walk away, an ache settling in his chest that he couldn't quite explain. As the door closed, the mansion felt colder, emptier than it ever had before. Lucas returned to his study, but the silence was deafening. For the first time, he realized how much warmth Emma and Sophie had brought into his life and how much he had already begun to miss them. The days after Emma and Sophie's departure were heavy for Lucas. The mansion, once a symbol of his success, now felt hollow. The grand hallways echoed with silence, amplifying the absence of the warmth Emma and Sophie had brought. Each room reminded him of their brief time there, the soft sound of Sophie's laughter, the sight of Emma cradling her child, and the fleeting sense of humanity they had introduced to his otherwise sterile life. Lucas found himself unable to focus on work. Documents piled on his desk, and his phone buzzed incessantly with calls and messages from colleagues and clients. Yet his thoughts remained tethered to the moment Emma walked out, her words cutting deeper than he had anticipated. Unable to shake the unease, Lucas finally admitted to himself that he had made a mistake. He had let Victoria's venomous words cloud his judgment, and he had hurt someone who had only shown gratitude and resilience in the face of unimaginable hardship. Determined to make amends, Lucas hired a private investigator to uncover Emma's story. He needed to know the truth, not just for his peace of mind, but to understand the woman who had unexpectedly touched his heart. Days later, the investigator returned with a thick file. Lucas hesitated before opening it, afraid of what he might find. Yet as he read, each line painted a picture of Emma's life that broke his heart further. She had been a bright student with a promising future in medicine, determined to make a difference in the world. But tragedy struck when a car accident claimed the lives of her parents, leaving her not only grief-stricken but financially burdened. Forced to leave medical school, Emma struggled to stay afloat, working multiple jobs while caring for her baby after Sophie's father abandoned them. The report detailed her descent into homelessness not because of poor choices, but because life had dealt her one misfortune after another. Despite everything, Emma had managed to shield Sophie from the harshest realities, keeping her daughter safe and loved. As Lucas finished reading, the weight of his mistake hit him like a blow. Emma's story wasn't one of manipulation or deceit. It was one of courage, sacrifice, and resilience. She had carried a burden far heavier than most could imagine, and instead of seeing her strength, he had doubted her. He thought back to Victoria's words, the seeds of distrust she had planted. How easily he had allowed her bitterness to poison his view of Emma. Guilt churned in his chest as he realized how deeply he had wronged her. "I have to find her," Lucas said aloud to himself, standing abruptly from his chair. He called the investigator again, this time with a more urgent task: to locate Emma and Sophie. While waiting for news, Lucas began to reflect on his own life. He had always prided himself on his independence and control, but the emptiness of his mansion now mirrored the emptiness in his heart. For all his wealth and success, he realized he lacked something far more valuable: connection, purpose, and love. Emma and Sophie had brought a light into his life that he didn't know he needed. Lucas resolved not only to apologize but to make things right, to show them that his actions stemmed not from pity but from genuine care. 2 days later, the investigator called with Emma's location. She was staying at a modest shelter in a quieter part of the city. Lucas didn't wait. He left his office immediately, his heart racing as he drove through the rain-slicked streets. When he arrived at the shelter, the building's humble exterior contrasted starkly with his opulent lifestyle. Lucas hesitated briefly, unsure of how Emma would react to seeing him again. But the image of Sophie's laughter and Emma's quiet strength gave him the courage to step inside. Inside, Lucas found Emma sitting in a small common room, Sophie playing with a few donated toys on the floor. She looked up as he approached, her expression a mix of surprise and guardedness. "Lucas?" she said, standing and holding Sophie protectively. "Emma," he began, his voice uncharacteristically soft. "I came to apologize." She looked at him, her eyes searching his face for sincerity. "You don't need to explain," she said cautiously. "I understand." "No," he interrupted, his tone firm but gentle. "You don't. I was wrong to doubt you. I let someone else's words cloud my judgment, and I hurt you because of it. I need you to know how deeply I regret that." Emma said nothing, her eyes filling with unshed tears. Lucas took a deep breath and continued. "I read about your past, everything you've been through. And I'm not here out of pity, Emma. I'm here because you and Sophie brought something into my life I didn't even know I was missing. Please come back. Not as guests, but as part of my life." Emma's heart raced as she listened. She wanted to believe him, but the pain of being doubted still lingered. "Lucas, I appreciate everything you've done, but I can't go through that again. I can't stay somewhere where I'm not trusted." "You have my word," Lucas said, his voice trembling with emotion. "If you come back, it will be different. No more doubts, no more questions. Just trust, respect, and a chance to build something real. Together." Emma looked down at Sophie, who was now watching Lucas with wide, curious eyes. The child's innocence reminded her of the hope she had fought so hard to hold on to. Slowly, she looked back at Lucas, searching his face for any sign of insincerity. She found none. "All right," she said softly, her voice trembling with emotion. "But only if this time, it's real." Lucas nodded, a smile breaking through the tension. "It will be," he promised. "I swear it." The drive back to Lucas's mansion was quiet but filled with an undercurrent of hope. Emma sat in the back seat with Sophie, who giggled softly as the raindrops streaked the windows. Lucas occasionally glanced at them through the rearview mirror, his heart swelling with determination to prove his sincerity. When they arrived at the mansion, Emma hesitated at the grand entrance. She clutched Sophie tightly, the weight of her decision settling over her. Lucas noticed her pause and gently opened her door, offering her a hand. "This is your home now," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "For as long as you'll have it." Emma took his hand, her grip tentative but resolute, and stepped inside with Sophie in her arms. The warmth of the mansion greeted them once again, but this time it felt different, less imposing and more like a place of possibility. The once empty halls of the mansion were now alive with laughter and warmth. Sophie's cheerful giggles echoed as she toddled around the spacious rooms, exploring with wide-eyed wonder. Emma, though still cautious, allowed herself to relax as the days passed. Lucas, true to his word, worked tirelessly to make Emma and Sophie feel welcome. He cleared his schedule to spend time with them, whether it was sharing meals or helping Sophie build towers out of wooden blocks. His transformation from a stoic CEO to a doting presence was gradual but unmistakable. One evening, as they sat in the living room, Sophie climbed onto Lucas's lap with a book in hand. "Read, Uncle Lucas," she chirped, mispronouncing a few words but beaming with excitement. Lucas smiled and obliged, his deep voice weaving through the pages of a children's story. Emma watched from the sofa, her heart softening with every passing moment. She could see the genuine care in his actions, and it gave her hope that this second chance might truly lead to something real. As Emma settled in, Lucas began to understand the depth of her struggles. He marveled at her resilience, but he also saw the exhaustion she carried. One day, while Sophie napped, Lucas approached Emma in the sunlit kitchen. "Emma," he began, "I've been thinking. You shouldn't have to do this alone anymore. I want to help you find your footing, not just here, but in life." Emma turned to him, her brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" "I want you to work with me at my company," he said. "We can find a role that suits your talents. You were studying to be a doctor once, right? Maybe we can find something in healthcare management or research." Emma's eyes widened. "Lucas, I don't know. I haven't worked in years." "You're stronger and more capable than you think," he replied earnestly. "I'll be with you every step of the way." Emma hesitated, but Lucas's unwavering confidence in her ignited a spark she hadn't felt in years. "Okay," she said finally. "I'll try." Over the next few weeks, Emma began her new role at Lucas's company. Though nervous at first, she quickly rediscovered her ability to adapt and learn. Lucas ensured she had the support she needed, always checking in and encouraging her progress. At home, their bond deepened. Lucas took on a fatherly role with Sophie, delighting in her milestones and making up for the moments she had missed with her absent biological father. One evening, while tucking Sophie into bed, Lucas was caught off guard when she reached up and called him Daddy for the first time. His throat tightened and he knelt beside her bed, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Is that okay?" Sophie asked innocently, her big eyes searching his for reassurance. Lucas smiled, his voice thick with emotion. "It's more than okay, sweetheart. It's perfect." Emma stood in the doorway, watching the scene unfold with tears in her eyes. She had always dreamed of Sophie having someone to look up to, and now that dream was becoming a reality. For the first time in years, Emma felt a sense of peace, a belief that they were no longer alone. That night, as Emma and Lucas sat together in the living room, she turned to him with a soft smile. "Thank you," she said, "for everything." Lucas reached for her hand, his expression earnest. "No, Emma, thank you. You and Sophie have given me something I didn't know I needed, a family." The days turned into weeks and Emma began to thrive in her new role at Lucas's company. The work was challenging, but she embraced it with determination. Lucas watched with pride as she regained her confidence, her natural intelligence and empathy shining through. At home, Sophie continued to bring joy into their lives. She was the glue that bound them together, her laughter filling the mansion with a warmth it had never known. Lucas found himself looking forward to the evenings when he could return from work, not to an empty house but to a home filled with love. One weekend, Lucas surprised Emma and Sophie with a picnic in the garden. It was a simple gesture: fresh sandwiches, lemonade, and a blanket under the shade of a sprawling oak tree. As Sophie chased butterflies nearby, Emma turned to Lucas with a smile. "This feels like a dream," she said softly. "I never imagined we'd have this." Lucas took her hand. "It's not a dream, Emma. It's real, and I promise to keep it that way." Lucas's bond with Sophie deepened each day. He relished the small moments, reading bedtime stories, building pillow forts, and teaching her to ride a bike in the driveway. His dedication to her was unwavering, and it didn't go unnoticed. One evening, as Sophie sat on his lap drawing with crayons, she looked up at him and said, "I love you, Daddy." The words caught Lucas off guard, and he felt a lump form in his throat. He pulled Sophie close, his voice filled with emotion. "I love you too, Sophie. So much." Emma, watching from the kitchen, felt her heart swell. Lucas wasn't just filling a role in Sophie's life. He was becoming the father she had always deserved. As Emma and Lucas grew closer, Victoria Lane became a distant memory. She had tried to maintain her hold on Lucas, but her jealousy and manipulations had only driven him further away. Realizing she could never compete with the genuine love and connection he had found with Emma and Sophie, she chose to leave. Her departure was met with little fanfare. Lucas didn't mourn the loss of her presence, understanding now that their relationship had been built on shallow foundations. In contrast, what he was building with Emma was authentic, rooted in trust and mutual respect. One quiet evening, Lucas and Emma sat on the sofa after Sophie had gone to bed. The fire crackled softly in the background, casting a warm glow over the room. Emma turned to Lucas, her expression thoughtful. "Did you ever think this would be your life?" she asked. Lucas shook his head with a small laugh. "Not in a million years. I was so focused on success and control that I didn't realize what I was missing." Emma smiled. "And now?" "Now," Lucas said, taking her hand, "I can't imagine life without you and Sophie. You've both given me something I never thought I needed. A family." Emma leaned her head on his shoulder, her heart full. For the first time in years, she felt safe, loved, and at peace. The next morning, as sunlight poured into the mansion, Lucas suggested they take Sophie to the park. Watching her play on the swings, Lucas turned to Emma. "Let's make this official," he said. "Not just for us, but for Sophie. I want to adopt her, Emma. I want her to know she's as much my daughter as she is yours." Emma's eyes filled with tears. She nodded, her voice trembling with emotion. "She'd be lucky to have you." Lucas smiled, feeling a sense of purpose unlike anything he had ever known. Together, they were building a life not just for themselves but for Sophie, a life filled with love, trust, and endless possibilities. Months turned into years, and the Harrington mansion was no longer a symbol of cold luxury. It was a home filled with laughter, warmth, and love. Lucas, Emma, and Sophie thrived as a family. Every room bore evidence of their new life together. Sophie's drawings on the refrigerator, family photos on the walls, and the cozy clutter of shared moments. The adoption process was finalized, and Sophie officially became Lucas's daughter. The ceremony was small, but deeply emotional. As Lucas signed the final document, Sophie stood beside him, holding his hand tightly. When the judge declared it official, Sophie looked up at Lucas with her bright eyes and said, "You've always been my dad." For Lucas, it was the culmination of his transformation. He had gone from a man consumed by business to a father and partner who understood the value of love and connection. As a family, they embraced their good fortune by giving back. Inspired by Emma's journey, Lucas started a foundation to support single parents and families in need. The foundation provided scholarships, housing assistance, and career training programs. Emma played an active role in the foundation, drawing from her own experiences to guide its mission. "No one should have to endure what I went through," she said during a speech at the foundation's launch. Lucas stood beside her, proud of her strength and the life they were building together. Sophie, too, learned the importance of compassion. On weekends, she often accompanied her parents to community events, helping other children and sharing her own toys and books. One quiet evening, Lucas and Emma sat together in the garden watching Sophie play with a puppy they had recently adopted. The soft glow of the sunset bathed the scene in golden light. "Do you ever think about that day in the rain?" Emma asked, leaning against Lucas's shoulder. "All the time," Lucas admitted. "It's the day my life truly began. I thought I was saving you and Sophie, but the truth is, you saved me. You gave my life meaning." Emma smiled, her eyes shimmering with emotion. "And you gave us hope. I'll never forget what you did for us." They sat in comfortable silence, watching as Sophie giggled and chased the puppy. For Lucas, this was the true measure of success, not the deals closed or the profits earned, but the love that surrounded him. Years later, Lucas and Emma shared their story with Sophie, explaining how a single act of kindness had brought them together. Sophie listened intently, her eyes wide with wonder. "So, if you hadn't stopped that day, we wouldn't be a family?" she asked. Lucas smiled. "That's right, it taught me something important, that the smallest choices can lead to the greatest changes." Emma added, "And it showed us that love is the most important thing we can share." Sophie nodded solemnly. "Then we should always choose kindness, As the story closes, the family's journey becomes an invitation for others to reflect on their own lives. The Harrington mansion, once a symbol of isolation, now represents the transformative power of love, trust, and compassion. What started as a rainy encounter on a busy city street had grown into a family bound not by blood, but by choice and commitment. What would you do if given the chance to change someone's life? Remember, kindness costs nothing but can create priceless moments. If you enjoyed this heartwarming tale of love, redemption, and family, please like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories. What moments of kindness have shaped your life? Let us know in the comments below.